Let's paint a thank you card with watercolor. I'm Viv, if we haven't met, and welcome to Art with Viv. I've just went through a hip transplant or hip replacement, and I got a lot of food and things from different friends and family, so I decided I would paint a thank you card so that I could send that to them to give all the thanks to all the people. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint my butterfly yellow. And I've got a nice bright yellow that I'm working on, and I'm going to paint the whole entire surface of the butterfly yellow except for the blue spots. There's some blue spots on him, and some of the black I'm going to just leave it white, some of the black markings. But for the most part, where the wings are the most yellow, I'm just going to paint yellow and then come back later and paint those black details. So I'm going to let you watch for a second, and then I will return when we get a little further along. Now I just want to note that I went with a little bit of a darker yellow toward the body, and as that yellow goes away from the body out to the tips of the wings, I made it a little bit lighter yellow. And that is just to give it a little bit of dimension. So now I'm going to mix up a nice blue and try to match it as much to the reference photo as I can, but I'm not trying to be spot on, photographic, perfect. I want this to be more decorative than realistic, but still real enough. So I am just going in there where those blue spots are. The best way that I figured out how to do it is to either put the paint down first and then put a little tiny drop of water at the very top and let that water push that pigment to the edges and have a lighter spot at the top. Or you can lift it, you can put your pigment down first, lift it, and then just come back in and drop the darker blue at the very bottom of those spots, and then lift up some of that paint. Because at the top of these markings, it's a lot lighter than it is at the bottom. It gets darker as it goes down toward those swallowtails. So that's all we're doing here, is we're just painting in the blue. And you see I'm coming back in, dropping just a drop of clean water at the very tip top, and that'll help. It creates a bloom. Blooms can be good. Some people don't like them, but you can use them to your advantage. So I'm just dropping a little bit of water right at that tip and making that pigment spread out and go down toward the edges and toward the bottom. So that's all I'm going to do right now. I'm going to let you watch. We're just painting in the blue spots, and I will return to you shortly. Now once you get those blue areas painted in, we're going to let all of that dry and we're going to work on the leaves. Now I painted one of the flowers and then I just left it, and I'm just going to show you there. We're going to come back and do something different. I didn't like the way I painted it, so I'm just leaving it. I've mixed up a nice sort of sagey green, and I am going to just paint all the leaves. And I've got like a bright, more yellow green for the lighter areas and a deeper, more sage green for those shadowy areas. Again, it's more decorative than realistic. I'm painting on that bright yellow first, that sort of yellow green, and then while it's still wet, I'm just coming in along one of the edges and dropping in that darker green and letting the water do the work for me. It's mixing and mingling right on the page as it should. That's how it works. You let that water do the work for you. You don't get stressed out. Let the water do the work. So we're going to continue on with these leaves for a little bit. Once we get those done, we're going to work on the flowers, and I'm going to let you watch. Remember, paint it first with a little bit of that paler, more yellow green, and then come in where you think there should be a shadow with that darker green while it's still wet, and let them mix and mingle right on the paper. And once we get these leaves finished up, we're going to go ahead back to the flowers. And I let this one dry. It has a yellow base to it. And I'm coming back with like a bright sort of rosy pink. And I'm painting in the edges of those petals. But I'm trying to leave a star shape in the center of that yellow. I want that yellow to look like a star in the center of the flower. So that's what I'm working on now. And then I'm just going to paint all of those flowers yellow, solid yellow, just like we did the wings of the butterfly, because this is just my experimental flower. I haven't painted these kind of flowers before, so I'm just trying some things out. So I've decided the best course of action is to just paint them all yellow first. So we're going to paint every one of these flowers all over yellow, and then we're going to let that dry. Now while those flowers are drying, the yellow's drying, I'm mixing up a black, and I'm using my blue and brown mixture. You know, that's my favorite mixture of black. You can use tube black. Sometimes it looks a little flat coming straight out of the tube, so I like to mix my own darks as much as possible, but sometimes for convenience I do use a tube black. And I'm just going to paint in his little eyes. This is when my detail brush actually comes in handy, because now we're actually doing some details. And I'm just going to paint in his black markings down his body, And then we are going to start on those markings on his wings. Again, make sure your wings are completely dry. Make sure the yellow is dry. You don't want this black to start bleeding all over the place. It'll make a mess, and we don't want messes. We don't want the messes. We want beautiful, crisp edges here. So I'm also doing some little tiny brush marks to look like hairs, because if you'll look at the butterfly, he's sort of fuzzy. His body is fuzzy, and some of those hairs are even going over across his wings. They're really pretty. Butterflies are just really pretty creatures. So I'm trying to get in just some tiny little tick marks so that it looks like, I want to say feathers, but I mean little tiny hairs, not feathers. We're not painting feathers, even though this little booger flies. It's not a bird. It doesn't have feathers. It has wings though. And I'm just going in on this blue part here, this bottom part, and where it's black, I'm painting in that black, going right over some of the blue in the areas, just trying to match the shapes to the reference photo. And I'm just doing this directly onto the blue. It's no big deal. I'm also making tiny little dots with the very tip of this detail brush. If you'll look really closely at the reference photo, you will see that it has tiny little dots. Now you might say, but Viv, I don't have the reference photo. Well, if you don't have the reference photo, you might consider joining my Sweet Art Squad. It's only $5 a month, and you get the reference photo, you get the complete supply list, you get an outline drawing that you can trace, so you don't have to worry if your drawing skills are a little sketchy. See what I did there? Anyway, you just join that $5 a month. You can cancel anytime. I'll link it below, and that way you'll have all you need to complete this project as far as instructions. Now, of course, you have to have your own paint and paper and pencil and stuff. So that, but I mean, as far as instructions, and you usually get 2 to 4 different projects a month. I try to keep it at 4, but with this recent hip replacement, it's only 2 for this month, and I apologize, but I can only do so much, and I can only sit up for so long on my hip. So I will link that. Maybe you're interested. I don't know. Check it out though. Also, we are just going to keep on with this black right along the edge of this butterfly. I'm not going to show you both sides. They're pretty much the same. So just remember to paint in the black areas. Also use the tip of your brush to do a little bit of pointillism, a little bit of stippling, and that's just tiny dots. And just to sort of blend the black into the blue. You can even come back with a little bit of the darker blue once this is dried and do a little bit more darker stippling. And there we have both sides done. I didn't want to bore you showing you both sides because they're basically the same exact technique. It's not really difficult. You're just painting in the black spots and then doing a little stippling around the edges at the bottom. All there is to it. Now we're going to let that black dry, and we're going to work on these flowers. I've got a little bit more of that sort of pinky rose color, and I'm just painting the outer edges of these petals, but I'm trying to do it in a way that makes the inside of the petals into a yellow star shape. So you can see how I'm doing that as I'm painting around each edge of each flower. And it's the same technique. Now I'm just painting directly onto dry paper here. There's nothing fancy about it. The biggest thing I'm trying to do is leave like a little star shape of the yellow in the center. That's the biggest part. And all I'm doing is just sort of painting an upside down teardrop shape where the point of that pink is going toward the center of the flower, and the larger part is the outer petal. And that's all there is to it. But you can paint it however you would like. These are your flowers. So if that seems a little bit confusing to you, just paint it how you want it. Just try to leave a yellow center, and just that's all you have to do. So I'm just going to keep painting around. All of the flowers are exactly the same. We're painting straight onto dry paper. There's no big magic to it, no crazy technique. We're just painting. Now, as we are finishing up the flowers, we're going to let them dry. I'm just doing a little bit of touch-up work here and there. Then I'm going to come back to my blue, and I am going to darken up that blue, but what I'm doing is just tiny little dots. I'm not painting a solid brush stroke. We're doing tiny little dots. That's going to brighten up that blue, and it's going to integrate it a little bit more with those black dots. We're just mixing and mingling. We're keeping that concentrated toward the bottom edge because the top edge is much lighter. It's just much lighter than that bottom edge. So we're avoiding the top edge, and we're just going around that bottom edge of each one of those little dots, concentrating a little bit darker blue. Now we're coming back to our black mixture, and we're just going to start adding in those details of the wings. I'm only going to show you one wing because it's the same thing. All we're doing is painting in those little areas black, or our mixture, our dark mixture, because it's not really actually a black. It's a blue and a brown mixed together to look like black. So that's all we're going to do here. We're just going to look at the reference and just try to follow along with that. And just get in all of those little details. We're painting straight onto dry paper. Again, make sure your wings are completely dry before you add your black markings, or else you're going to bleed and have a mess. You'll have a mess. We don't want a mess. No messes for us. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm going to let you watch. It's not a difficult thing. Again, we're just painting straight onto dry paper. So we're doing wet onto dry, just getting in those little markings, and then we're going to paint along the edges of the wings where that black band expands right on the edge. And that's all we're doing. It's not difficult, but it can be time consuming because this is kind of a small painting, and for some reason small paintings take me longer than larger paintings. So I'm going to let you watch a little bit, and I will return. So we are finishing up this edge. Again, I'm not going to show you the other side. It's the same exact technique. You just have to follow along with the reference and you will be fine. So with the magic of video, here we go. Both sides will be done and we will move on. Just getting a little bit of that detail. So there you go. Those are both sides done. And I'm just finishing up on this other little wing, just a few little tiny dots right there on the edge. There is some stippling there, so I'm just going to add that. And now I'm taking a little bit of a darker yellow, and I'm just going to make little dots in the center of each one of my flowers. They're dry. Make sure they're dry before you do that. But after painting the stripes on the butterfly, they should be thoroughly dry because that takes a little while. And now I'm just going to come back in, and with this nice blue mixture, I've mixed up a nice sort of a turquoisey blue with a little bit of cobalt, and I'm just going to paint the circle that is around the butterfly. I'm getting into those little tiny areas first, and then I will work my way around that circle, and I'm being careful to go around what I've already painted and just getting in those where it's just kind of peeking through the flowers, that background, that blue background, and that's really pretty up against those pinky orangey flowers. It's a really pretty color combination, that blue and pinkish orange, and I'm enjoying it. So we're just going to continue until we get that whole circle painted in, and again we are just painting wet on dry. We are not wetting the circle because I don't want the butterfly and the flowers and leaves to bleed, and if I wet that circle and I accidentally get them wet, they will bleed out into it, those colors. So we are keeping that paper dry and just painting wet on dry, and we're just going to go around the whole butterfly in that little circle. The best advice for this part is to work fast, so that it's pretty much uniform. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat wash. It's not going to be because we're putting a lot of brush strokes in there, but it'll be pretty uniform if you work fast and don't let any edges dry, so that you don't want any hard edges because that'll leave streaks. So just work fast. Work in sections too. I broke it up into 3 sections and I worked those 3 sections one at a time, and that helped me keep it wet and pretty uniform in color. So we are just going to finish this circle off. Again, this is the time I should have used a larger brush. It would have taken less time. You live, you learn. I knew better, but I did it anyway. Sometimes I just do what I want to do. I don't know what gets into me. Even if I know better, I still do what I want to do. And again, it's my painting. I can do what I want to do with it. And you can do what you want to do with your painting. But so far you're doing a great job, and I'm proud of you for even trying, just putting in that effort. That is the first steps to success, is actually doing something. So we're going to let that dry a little bit. And now that it's dry, I've just got an even darker blue. I'm just going to paint in these thank you letters that I drew in. I'm not a good handwriter, so I tried my best to make this nice and neat. And I'm just going to paint over it with the blue paint. And once you get it, it should look okay. I mean, I think that looks okay. It's not perfect, but it is hand lettered, so it's okay. I'm taking a little bit more of that darker yellow, and I'm just adding a few little details, a few little hairlines, like the little brush strokes around that body, just to deepen that and give it a little bit more dimension. I'm going to come back in here with some darker green and just add some more shadows, and that also gives a little more definition and dimension to the leaves, darkens them up. They dried very much paler than I expected, so I'm just adding a little bit more green to them, darken them up, let them be a little bit more defined. And it looks really good, so you can come back and do that. And then you can, once you get you paint the darker green, clean your brush with some clean water, you can sort of blend it out across the leaf if you want to, and that makes it look more blended and less like you just drew a stripe on there. I mean, painted a stripe on there. We don't want any stripes, we want nice blended edges. So just dip your brush in some clean water and go along those edges of that freshly painted shadow, and that will blend it out. Yes, that looks much better. I'm also going to come in here with a little bit of a darker pink and add some shadows into those flowers, just to give them a little bit more dimension and another shade of color. And there's nothing to that. I'm just doing almost like little dots, just little dots of that darker pinky rosy, almost maroon color. So you're just going to work on those little flowers, going all around, getting in some shadows there, and that gives them a little more dimension, a little bit more color. I really like how this is turning out. I think it's going to be a really pretty thank you card to give to all those people that sent me food, sent me cards, sent me all kinds of stuff. So we will see how it goes. And just taking that black mixture, painting in his little antenna. I'm going to let those dry. And you can put another layer of blue on that background if you want, if that's too light for you. It's up to you. Now I'm just taking my white gel pen and I'm just doing some dots to give it a little bit of interest. I'm also adding a little bit of highlights down his body, just a few little light marks. Highlights on his eyes and on the little tips of his antenna, and just in some different spots. I'm just doing a little bit of white highlights, and that gives it a little bit more pop, a little bit more sizzle. We like a little sizzle sometimes. And then I'm just putting some highlights on the flowers. So I'm just using my white gel pen to just sort of highlight some areas. I'm also going to do tiny little dots on the background of the blue, just to give it a little more designerly look. I don't know, a little more sparkle. We like sparkle. So that's all I'm doing here, is just adding the white highlights, and then we are going to do some dots on that background. I really like these little dots. It's almost like stars, or it could be those little tiny bugs that you see that sometimes float around, and they're really light colored and they almost look like snow sometimes. Maybe that's just in the South, I don't know. But yeah, I like the little white dots on the background. I think it gives it a nice designerly effect, and it's really pretty. So we are almost finished. I hope you have enjoyed this. And there you go, a pretty little thank you card, good enough for anybody in your life. So thank you for watching. Please hit subscribe, share it with a friend that you think would like it. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment. Tell me what you'd like to see me paint next. All right, bye for now.